Elen Sila Lumen Omentielvo. Today I bring to you all the history of Arnor. I had originally made this video over 5 years ago, but I've decided to remake it as my editing and scripting has improved over the years. So let us begin. The boundaries of Arnor ran north past the Emin Uial, south to the Sea of Belagar, west to the Misty Mountains but excluding the region of Holland, formerly known as Eregion, and east until the border of Linden. The roots of Arnor would be laid when the great Numenorian prince Aldarion created the port Vignalonde along the Guathro River. During the millennium of darkening within Numenor, many of the faithful would leave the island and sail to settlements in Eriador, and what would become known as Gondor. In 3319 of the Second Age, the king Ar-Pharazôn took a great fleet and attacked the undying lands of Valinor. Eru Ilúvatar, in response, would sink the island, but 9 ships escaped the disaster. These ships were of the faithful, led by their lord Elendil, now the heir of the line of Elros. Elendil would sail 4 of the ships to Eriador, while his sons Isildur and Anarion would sail into the south and form Gondor. Elendil, upon reaching the shore, would proclaim, Etearelo, Endorena Utulien, Sinome Maruvan, Hildinyar, Tenamba Meta. Out of the great sea to Middle-earth I am come. In this place I will abide, and my heirs unto the ending of the world. Elendil would found the kingdom of Arnor, and its capital city of Numenor, and he ruled as High King of both Gondor and Arnor. The elves of Linden would soon form a friendship with the Dunedain of Arnor, especially Gil-galad and Elendil. It was in the name of friendship that Gil-galad built the Emin Bariad for Elendil, who placed the greatest of the 7 Palantiri in the tower. In 3429 of the Second Age, war was once again waged as the Dark Lord Sauron attacked Minas Ithil in Gondor, sparking the War of the Last Alliance. When word reached Arnor, Elendil stood upon the top of Amansul, the watchtower, waiting for the arrival of Gil-galad's army. When the elven king arrived, the two swore an oath of alliance together, and marched off to Rivendell to gather their strength. Ultimately, the war was won for the free peoples, though the cost was many lives of elves and Dunedain, including Elendil, Gil-galad, and Anarion. The crown of Arnor would then pass on to Isildur, who stayed in Gondor for the first 2 years of the New Age, before heading off for Arnor. But Isildur and his party would be killed in the disaster of the Gladden Fields, and Isildur's last remaining son, Valandil, would become the 3rd king of Arnor. To the Dunedain of the north came the shards of Narsil, along with the important heirlooms of the Ring of Barahir and the Scepter of Numenor. Little of note would occur during the reign of many of the next kings of Arnor, and it seems that records were either destroyed or little was written in the days of peace. But in 936 of the Third Age, King Earendor, the 10th king of Arnor, died. His son, Amlith, should have ascended to the throne as the 11th king, but Amlith was opposed by his 2 brothers, each of whom desired the throne and acquired a host of followers. Rather than risk a destructive civil war, the kingdom was split into 3 petty kingdoms. Arthedain in the northwest, occupying most of the cities such as Numenor and Fornost. Cardalin in the south, who took possession of Tharbad as well as the ancient burial mounds of the Barrow-downs. And Rhudaur in the northeast, who took the forest of the Trollshaws. In the wake of Arnor's split, Amlith removed the capital from Numenor, which had faced a major population decrease, to Fornost, a city that was further north and more easily defended. For years, tension and strife reigned between the different kingdoms, the most common of which was for control of the Weather Hills, a series of heavily fortified hills that bordered all three kingdoms. But it was not just the position of the forts that mattered, but the palantir that was kept inside of Amansul. Around this time, the kingdom of Angmar was founded by a mysterious dark being of whom the Dunedain knew not. Through his influence, Rudaur would become a realm of darkness, led by wicked hillmen in service of Angmar. During the rule of Argaleb I, the line of Isildur was ended in both Rudaur and Cardolin, and Argaleb claimed kingship over all of Arnor once more. The prince of Cardolin, who now ruled the kingdom, accepted Argaleb's claim, but Rudaur resisted. In 1365, the war with Angmar began, when forces from Rudaur attacked Argaleb, and he would be slain in battle at the Weather Hills. With help from Círdan the Shipwright, Arveleg, the son of Argaleb, stabilized Arnor for a time being. That was until 1409, when the Witch King launched a full-on assault against Arnor, laying waste to the Weathered Hills and Amansul. There Argaleb fell, as did the last prince of Cardolin, but the palantir that rested within the walls of the fortress was taken away and secured in Fornost. The Dunedain of Arnor thus retreated west and southward, leaving Rudaur in the hands of Angmar. Those Dunedain who remained in that traitorous land were slain, but many would flee towards Arthedain. Arnor was now weak and ripe for a continued offensive from Angmar, but a combined elven force would subdue the Witch King for a time, allowing for peace to be restored. But the Weather Hills were not refortified. Even with forces from Cardolin, the Dunedain could no longer keep those strategic hills secure. Not all was despair in this age, however, for in the year 1600, a group of halflings entered into the annals of Middle-earth. Two brothers, Marco and Blanco, secured for their people a region within Arthedain in which to settle. More of their folk would come and create the Shire. The hobbits, as they are come to be known, pledged themselves to the king of Arnor, Argaleb II. In 1636, a mysterious plague came out of the east and began to ravage the peoples of Middle-earth. The hobbits suffered greatly during this time, and many men from Cardolin would perish, but the plague would lessen as it reached the borders of Arthedain. With Cardolin weakened, the Witch King summoned wights and sent them forth into the Barrow Downs, where the last remnant of Cardolin dwelt. There, terror like no other inflicted the Dunedain, and though they fought valiantly, they were no match for the wights, who now inhabited their dead against them. Cardolin fell, leaving Arthedain as the last region of Arnor. The last great victory for Arnor would come under the rule of Maureval. He, in an alliance with the elves, struck out and defeated the armies of Angmar, forcing them back to Carn Dûm. Maureval had hoped with this victory to repopulate Cardolin and thus re-strengthen the southern regions. But the Barrow Wights remained a consistent threat, and fear of such devils kept the land from being resettled. When Maureval passed away and his son Arafant took the throne, Angmar began to harass the borders of Arnor, testing the Dunedain's strength and power. It was in this time that communication was once again established between Arnor and Gondor. The kings of these realms realized that some force was conducting war between the two realms in exile, seeking to destroy the Dunedain. They could not possibly have known just how right they were. Thus, a new alliance between the sister kingdoms was formed, and each realm vowed to aid the other in their time of need should they be summoned. To cement the alliance, Arafant's son, Arvedui, married King Ondohair's daughter, Firiel. In 1944, Gondor's war with the Wayne Riders of the East turned deadly, as Ondohair and his two sons were killed in the disaster of the Morannon. Though Gondor would recover and win the war in the Battle of the Camp, they were now kingless. Arvedui sent a message to the ruling council of Gondor, laying claim to the throne as an heir of Isildur. The council would reject this claim, as they argued that Isildur gave up his right to the throne when he departed north, and that the heirs of Anarion should rule. Arvedui countered this by stating that in the old laws of Numenor, in which both Gondor and Arnor descend, the next in line for the throne would be the eldest of the king's children, and that seeing how Firiel was now the last surviving child of Ondoher, she therefore should receive the crown of Gondor. The council did not respond to this claim, and instead chose Eärnil, a distant cousin to the deceased king, as next in line. Eärnil would write to Arvedui, reaffirming the alliance between the two kingdoms, and proclaiming that he would send Gondor's armies to Arnor's aid should Arvedui need it. That time would come in 1974, just 10 years into Arvedui's reign as king. Angmar, seeing that Arnor was weak, loosened one final offensive against the kingdom. Arvedui and his forces were driven from the capital of Fornost, and many Dunedain refugees, led by Arvedui's sons, fled to Lindon under the protection of Círdan. Arvedui himself took the two Palantiri and fled to the old dwarven halls of the Blue Mountains, before coming to the ice bay of Forukel. There, a ship sent by Círdan would come and take Arvedui, but the ship was sunk when it hit an iceberg, and Arvedui and the Palantiri were lost. The next year, Gondor had arrived in force to aid their sister kingdom, and while Arnor may have fallen, she was avenged by the united forces of Dunedain and elves, and in one final climactic battle, the kingdom of Angmar fell, and the Witch King fled. Aranarth, the eldest son of Arvedui, and by right the head of Isildur's house, saw the destruction of his people, and instead of rebuilding Arnor, chose to inhabit the wild as the first chieftain of the Dunedain. For millennium, Arnor remained in ruins, its histories forgotten by all except the rangers that wandered her borders. But that was not the end for Arnor, as in 3019 of the Third Age, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and the heir of the house of Elendil, came to the throne of Gondor, and he set about the restoration of Arnor, thus creating the reunited kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor. The city of Numenor was restored to its former glory, became once more the capital seat in Arnor. The ruffians and brigands in the village of Bree would be driven out once and for all, and Eriador would become much more peaceful again. The Shire was rewarded with more lands of 40 leagues in all directions, and Aragorn, under the name of Elisar, declared that no man would enter into the bounds of the Shire without permission from the halflings. King Elisar would die of old age in the 120th year of the Fourth Age, leaving the scepter to his son, Eldarion, who would continue to rule the reunited kingdom. And so ends the history of Arnor. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, feel free to like and subscribe for more content. And as always, please let me know how I can better improve these videos. Thanks, and as the elves say, Namarie.